So I had an interesting experience on Monday. So we are actually going to be revisiting a topic from a previous episode because I now have some pretty good insight on that. So with that out of the way, welcome to this week's episode of Divergence and Divine. My name is WIllspiration, and welcome to RSD2, RSD Harder, which is a pun, by the way. An old YouTuber I used to watch would do that with some of his episodes where if he had to do something, it would be like Rocket Redundancy 2, Rocket Harder. And the whole entire thing was like a Die Hard 2, Die Harder reference. So yeah, it was pretty funny when he would do that. It's like, oh, okay. So we're doing this again, are we? So I don't know. I just thought it'd be a nice little funny joke to throw in there. But yes, we are going to be talking about rejection sensitive dysphoria again, just because I had an interesting bout with that over the last couple weeks that I kind of kept secret because I like to deal with it on my own now and this is where we're going to start talking about it. The reason being is because I noticed that whenever I have RSD, I have a tendency to vent to friends, families, like family, etc. And let's just say that having RSD is the reason why I've lost so many friends, because of the fact that I have such horrible self-esteem and self-confidence issues from like being picked on in school and being teased, and especially not knowing that I was autistic and ADHD back then kind of made it a whole lot worse. I feel like if I would have been diagnosed sooner, I wouldn't have been picked on as much. Like people would have kind of slowly introduced teasing and things like that. So it would have been like a completely different thing for me. And instead, it just kind of led to me having RSD. But rule one of RSD is never vent to anybody about your RSD, because I'll be honest, a lot of people out there typically don't like negative talk, and I had to learn this the hard way. But a lot of people, they'll hear you out one time about your RSD. Like, it's fine. They don't mind helping you one time. But if you constantly go to people over and over and over again for your RSD to seek reassurance, it ends up pushing people away more than you realize. And oftentimes what will end up happening is like it'll lead to resentment, and then your friends will start kind of being like, oh, I'm busy, I can't talk right now, because either A, because they genuinely are busy, or B, they just don't want to hear it. So what that does is it makes your RSD even worse, because now you're looking to confide in a friend, and now they're all of a sudden they're busy. So now your brain is going to go, well, are they actually busy, or are they actually just blowing me off because they don't want to talk to me? And then it like makes you question your friendship, and it's a whole mess. And then if it happens in a relationship, oh, that's even worse if it happens in a relationship, because now your partner is going to think that you don't trust them, that you don't love them, when in reality, you're just afraid that you're not good enough for them and that you're not providing enough. Like you feel like you're not good enough, like you are not doing enough to keep them happy, even though you could be going above and beyond, and they can tell you time and time again, you're the most amazing person and I love you. And your brain would still be like, that's a lie. They're just saying that to make you feel better. Don't believe it. And yeah, that can have an impact on romantic relationships, and is kind of a romantic killer in a way, because of the fact that it's just like your brain doesn't believe anything that friends, family, significant others tell you at face value, and you kind of go, well, if it wasn't like this. But here's the thing about RSD is the fact that it's not your fault that you ended up like this, because most of the time when you don't get the right support, or like if you don't see a therapist, you don't have the tools that you need to overcome RSD. So rather than learning how to accept the fact that, people people drift apart, and sometimes relationships don't last. Sometimes friendships don't last. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, it also kind of helps you kind of weed out who's actually your friends or not. Like, for example, my friend that I have at work, I told them, that I was going to be off my phone for a couple days and that I was having a really bad bout of RSD. I explained what RSD is and how it affects me and how it makes me feel like everybody hates me, like I'm doing everything wrong, and that people don't like me. And I specifically told her, I said, no one did anything wrong. No one is being mean to me or anything like that. It's just literally how my brain works. And I just need a couple days to myself because I don't want to bother anyone with this. And really and truly, the only way that I'm going to be able to handle this is just by talking with my therapist. I mean, that's not exactly word for word what I sent in the text, but basically the gist of that text message was that. And then my friend responded with a supportive text, a sympathetic text of, "Oh, I'm sorry you're going through that right now. I hope, I wish there was something that I could do to help." So what I did was I let her know that honestly, just that one text was more than enough. And it was a huge help because most of the time, my friends don't actually check up on me in the past. Like, that's how I've lost so many friends, because my brain was like, oh, well, they didn't wish you, well or anything like that, or offer support or be like, I wish I could help you somehow. So they must obviously not be friends, right? But my friend from work specifically, she was supportive, but she also knew to not, I guess, it's at least from my perspective, it's like she knew that I needed my distance too. And that, she respected that decision, that I needed a couple days and that it was okay. And that I'm going to be okay. I just need to take time to myself and fight this battle, see my therapist, and then just kind of talk it out and I'll feel much better. And I do. I feel way better now than I did Monday night. Actually, I felt a lot better when I woke up Tuesday morning, honestly. And I kind of just reassessed everything, because when you get, I guess, belittled and yelled at because you can't keep up with something at work, those people, even though you don't know them, it just makes you feel bad about yourself. And then once you start feeling bad about yourself and you question, well, if this random coworker who's pretty much a stranger outside of work doesn't like me, do my friends like me? And if you're in a relationship, you go, does my significant other like me? Does my family like me? Am I really that annoying and that much of a burden to everybody? And the answer is no, you're not. It's just everyone has a level of emotional availability and mental availability. Some people, like me, for example, I love helping people. I could listen to 5 or 6 people's different problems in a day and I'd be totally fine with it. Other people might only be able to handle that one time, from 1 or 2 people. And that might be maybe twice a week, right? And it's because, they either have their own stuff going on or they're just super busy and they just don't have time, whatever it may be. So it's always a good rule of thumb to make sure that when you do try to vent to someone about it, that they are someone that is emotionally and mentally available, because if they don't have the mental capacity or the emotional capacity at that moment, they can't really help you, especially if they're already struggling with something themselves. So it's always good that if someone's just sorry, I can't really help you right now because I'm not doing okay either, then that's not them trying to say, oh, my life is worse than yours right now. Your problem is just you being stupid. It's literally that person saying, hey, I'm struggling in life too right now. So we're kind of in the same boat. And that boat is on a crash course to some remote island in the middle of the ocean right now. So you know, like neither one of us can steer the ship, so we're kind of both screwed for now. That's kind of basically what it's saying is like, it's not that they don't want to help you, it's that they just don't have the emotional or mental capacity right now because they themselves are dealing with their own struggles and their own life right now. But that's what I really liked about my friend sending that supportive text, because it's like, it's acknowledging that I'm aware that she has a lot of stuff going on in her life right now, so she can't really do much to help me. And also the fact that she doesn't really know how to help me because of the fact that it's not something that she's ever encountered before. Like, this is something that's new to her. This is something that is, you know, I mean, RSD is not something that people know about. Like, if you go up to someone and go, hey, do you know what rejection sensitive dysphoria is? People are going to be like, no, what's that? And then depending on the people, some people will go, oh, wow, that sounds really rough. You know, I'm sorry that you have to deal with that. And then some people are going to look at you and be like, oh, grow up. Stop being a baby. Everyone gets rejected. That's a part of life. You know, just fucking grow a pair and man up. I'm, of course, talking about this from a man's perspective, but it still kind of sucks because like you're looking for support, and you know, people might just tell you to get over it, and it is something that you will get over. Like, that episode will eventually end and you'll be fine, but you just got to find the way for you to cope with it and how you want to go about grounding yourself and getting yourself in that space of mind or rather frame of mind, I should say, frame of mind and mind, you know, mindfulness of kind of looking at the facts. Because the other thing you got to do is you got to challenge what you already know. Because if you know that you haven't done anything wrong, because you know that the people in your life will tell you if you did, and if you have friends and you did upset them and they were upset, they might avoid you, then you know, oh, I might have did something wrong. But if people are just busy and they're like in their own heads, then it's just kind of like, it's not like they're actively ignoring you. They probably have a lot of things too. Again, like my friend, she's got so much stuff going on right now that like whenever I see her walking, like I can just tell by the look on her face, like she is in her head. Like she is like so mentally checked out that she's just kind of like not even paying attention. Like I can tell because she'll like usually look at the ground. She walks kind of fast. You know, if people say hi, but they don't say it loud enough, she'll like keep walking because she's not even paying attention. She's just kind of like in survival mode. She's just kind of like, you know, I'm here. I need to do this. You know, like I just need to work and go home. I got a lot of stuff going on. So, and then there's times where, you know, she's actually more social and more mentally available because, you know, things have kind of calmed down a little bit. So she's kind of coming out of survival mode, and now she's a little more social and a little more, you know, outgoing, as opposed to kind of being stuck in her head a lot. So that's also another thing to be aware of, is that people do have their own struggles. And even if you don't know it, people could, or even if they don't know it, people could have severe anxiety and depression and not even know. So it's always a good thing to not take things personally when people can't help you because they're struggling as well. So my biggest thing is that like it's always good to have a therapist, because at the end of the day, when it comes to RSD, seeking reassurance from friends, family, and significant others can, while it's good, it can also have an impact on your relationship. Like it can cause your relationship with your friends, with your family, and your significant other to become more strained. And the more strain you put on it, obviously, the worse it gets. And eventually that could end up ruining a friendship or ruining a relationship, or, you know, causing your family to kind of just not want to really have much contact with you. And you're kind of just left on your own. So it's not exactly the greatest thing, but at the same time, it's also something that only you yourself can deal with, because everyone can tell you, "Oh no, you're good. You didn't do anything wrong. I promise." Like we're straight. Like we're cool. Like we're still friends. Or like, if you're in a relationship, your significant other can go, "I still love you. This doesn't change anything. I love you, flaws and all." And even after all of that, your brain might still go, "Oh, but that's probably a lie though. How do I know that they're not saying that just so that I don't think that, they actually have a problem with me?" So when you have that, the best thing to do is to challenge your thoughts and go, "Okay, I know my friends, I know my family, I know my significant other. I know that if they had a problem with me, that they would tell me if I did something wrong. If I pissed them off in some way, they would have said something. And even if they didn't, they would have started actively avoiding me or like kind of blowing me off. And then I've been like, oh, I must have did something wrong. So now I know that, hey, everything is good. So that's a good first step. That's the first step really, is you want to make sure you look at all of your existing relationships and go, all right, I know these people in my life would tell me something if I did something wrong. No one has said anything. Some of them are already going through their own problems as it is. Nobody's mad at me. Cool. Now you've taken the group of people that you socialize with, that you associate with, and you put them in that category of we're good. Now you take all the people that like you work with and, people that you've interacted with that aren't in your social like circle essentially. And then you go, okay, now these are just people that are coworkers or like just a random like clerk at a gas station that I see frequently or something. And then you go, these people don't really play a significant role in my life. So do their opinions of me really matter? No, because if their opinions mattered and if I mattered to them, they would be in my social circle. They are not in my they are not in my social circle. So therefore, they are not, their opinions are insignificant. So now you've isolated all of that. Now, if you're worried about like what your bosses think at work, then you go, well, my boss hasn't said anything to me, so I'm obviously doing a good job. That means that anything that I was told was just to help me out and not criticism of me being a terrible person. So now you're starting to isolate like work, personal life, relationships, and the like into categories of, hey, everything is not what it seems, and the root cause of this is my RSD. So now that you've taken care of all of the external stuff, now you go inwards and you look at yourself and go, okay, why is my RSD acting up? And then you look at it and you kind of find the reason. So like for me, it was because at work of me getting, yelled at by a coworker because I couldn't keep up, and they were giving me attitude and they were making me feel bad about myself, because I feel bad about myself as an autistic person when I struggle with hand-eye coordination, and that one specific spot made me feel insignificant and made me feel like I was worthless because of my autism, right? So I acknowledged that, hey, this isn't right. Obviously, I know that I'm a very, very capable worker. I mean, a lot of people on my work see me moving up the ladder and becoming like a team lead or a supervisor, or even maybe plant manager, because I just genuinely have that skill and that personality, and that's great. But at some point, as the week goes on, it's different now with me being on weekend shift, because if it happens on a Monday, well, now I have 4 days to recoup. But as soon as I walk through that door, then I kind of start questioning like, well, if these random coworkers that have a problem with me don't like how I work, what about the rest of my coworkers? And what about the coworkers that I am friends with, that I've made friends with outside of work? Like, do they actually like me, or am I like a nuisance? And it's like, at the end of the day, it's almost like you can't pinpoint how people feel about you. And then you kind of start to doubt, people at work. And so if you're friends with some of your coworkers outside of work, or at least fairly well acquainted with them, then you're going to start questioning how they feel about you. And then that's going to make you question your actual friends that you don't work with, that are like outside connections from work. And then that's going to make you question your, relationship with your family. And then if you are in a relationship with somebody, it's going to make you question if that person loves you or not. And you just kind of start spiraling. And then the only thing you can really do is just cry and feel like nobody really cares about you, and you're struggling, and all you're doing is failing people and letting people down, and that people are just not going to tell you to your face because, they don't want to see you cry, and that they're just accepting you out of pity rather than actually caring about you, which is not the case. So you have to really, like I said, you got to break it down. You got to break down all the people that in your life that you interact with, your social circle, your family, your significant other, co-workers, bosses, and just kind of look at it, put them in the category of, people that would tell you when you're doing something wrong, the people that you barely interact with, that like you shouldn't really even care about their opinions because they don't play a significant role in your life. Like they're just co-workers who gives two shits what they think of you, right? And then if your bosses haven't told you anything about your work ethic or about any interactions that you've had with other coworkers at work, then that you're doing a good job at work. You're just like, everything is fine. It's just your RSD is acting up. And most of the time, and I'm not sure if this is true, but I just feel like this is my own personal opinion. I'm going to literally Google this after the podcast. Just because if I Google it on my phone right now, I'll have to do even more editing than I probably already do. But I know I Googled it, and it says that while RSD is not a form of depression, it can trigger depressive episodes if you have depression. So since I have an unspecified depressive disorder, it usually will trigger that. And it usually stems from me not feeling good enough and feeling worthless and useless because I'm autistic and I just can't clearly do things that neurotypicals can. So I'm already automatically less than, which isn't true. If anything, I've proven myself to be more than capable than people around me, which, is pretty easy to say when you don't really socialize that much. Because then you can only compare yourself to a small group of people. But I would say that I myself, despite being autistic and ADHD, that I am an average, reliable person. Maybe even above average, but I'm not going to say that I'm perfect. But, I would say I score somewhere between 55 and like 65% percentile of being very reliable, like in terms of the population. I've fallen that like above average range. So like that's normal. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with me. Like I'm human. There's nothing about me says that I'm a heartless monster. I am literally extremely reliable, and that should be more than enough proof to just say, hey, if coworkers don't like how I work, well then, they can fuck off, right? But you know what? Out of curiosity now, I am curious. I am gonna Google this. I don't care if I have to edit. I want to see if RSD is a form of depression. So let me see. Or not a form of depression. All right. So I wanted to see if it was a form of trauma, and it's not a form of trauma or a form of depression, though it can trigger those things. So like if you have PTSD or any sort of trauma from your past, or if you have depression, it can, it can trigger a depressive episode, or, it can kind of bring back some traumatic memories, which, can obviously affect anyone, people differently. But at the end of the day, you kind of just have to, I guess, learn to manage it, because it is lifelong. It's permanent. Like once you develop RSD, like that's pretty much it. Like, you're stuck with it forever. Like, it is a part of you. And it's not all of you, but it is a part of you. And it's something that you have to, learn to manage. And it sucks, but it's doable. And like my therapist was telling me in my appointment earlier today, is that each opportunity is a growing experience. It's a learning experience. It is a way for you to gather more information about how your brain works during that time. Because like her and I were discussing, if this was me, like even just like 2 years ago, I would have had an RSD. If I would have had an RSD episode, I would have been like, that would have been it. Like, I would have been like depressed, and I would think back to very sad memories of being, outcasted in school and being rejected by girls when I, told them that I liked them. And I'd just literally be crying like for 2 days, maybe 3, feeling like I'm not good enough, feeling like because if I wasn't autistic, this wouldn't have happened. If I was normal, this wouldn't have happened. But now, instead, when it finally got to the point where I finally had an RSD episode Monday night, I was like, all right, I'm like, I can keep ignoring and trying to force my RSD episode down, or I can just let it come out and just manage it now. Because the one thing that I know that I've done since I've learned about RSD is like telling myself, okay, this is an RSD episode. None of my thoughts that I'm thinking right now are true. I'm just going to ignore it, and I'm just going to just not acknowledge the thoughts. But the problem is by not acknowledging the thoughts, all I'm doing is just taking a stick and just shoving those thoughts into a bottle. Like, basically, the best way to put it is like the thoughts are like Mentos, and like the chemical is like a slightly watered down version of Coke, where it's like, in my thought, like at least in my thought process for this analogy, is that basically it's like a slightly watered down Coke. So like if I drop a Mentos in there, it'll fizz a little bit, but it's not gonna like explode into a fountain like it typically does when you put Mentos in there. But after you put enough Mentos in there, it will eventually overflow. But that's kind of the analogy. Is my thoughts are Mentos. It's the chemical in the bottle is basically a slightly watered down version of Coke. And I'm just throwing Mentos into soda, basically. And so the soda being the RSD, and then the thoughts kind of just, feeding the RSD. Because now, rather than challenging them at that moment, I go, well, obviously I know that they're not real, so I'm not going to challenge them because I know they're not real. So I'm actually actively making it worse by not challenging them then and there. So by me finally accepting, you know what? I know I'm going to have an RSD episode. I know that if I keep ignoring these and I don't start challenging them soon, I'm going to have a really bad RSD episode. And then I'm going to be just completely in a just state of depressive, just not feeling good about myself or wanting to be around anyone in general. And I'm going to feel like I am just a defective human because I have autism and ADHD. So instead, I just let myself get sad. I literally rushed out of work Monday because I felt myself about to cry. I held back the tears until I got in the car, and then I cried the whole way home, and then I stopped crying, and then I got home, and then I laid down in bed, and then I cried a little bit again, and then I just kind of laid there, and once I stopped crying, I just was just like, okay, I'm just going to watch YouTube videos for a little bit, and then I'm going to go to bed, and then I'm going to start challenging these thoughts in the morning. And that's exactly what I did. When I started falling asleep watching a YouTube video and I knew that my brain was already super mentally checked out, I said, okay, it's bedtime. I'm going to go to bed, and I'm going to wake up in the morning, and I'm going to start challenging these thoughts because obviously I know where this is going. And sure enough, after getting a nice 8 hours of sleep, I woke up in the morning. I challenged all of these thoughts, did exactly everything that I said earlier in this episode. And then I was like, cool. now I just got to let my brain reset and I will be good. And so I just been doing things that I normally do, like gaming, drawing, writing, just, having a live stream in the background to just have some background noise while I do this stuff. And then I get to my appointment and I tell my therapist all this. And, a couple of the things, we still work through because obviously everyone's very, RSD is going to affect everyone differently. Sometimes it's going to be way worse for others. Sometimes it's going to be very mild. And, you just might want to talk about it with your therapist for a little bit. And, that's pretty much it. So I'd say my RSD is average. So we talked about it. We kind of made some little tweaks to my plans, and we have a little bit of an affirmation that I have now that I do, which is just reminding myself that I am worthy of happiness. I am worthy of having friends. I'm worthy of being loved, that I am not defective or broken, and that, my autism and my ADHD is a part of me, and that I am human and that I love myself, flaws and all. And it's just a very helpful reminder and a good way to ground myself during it, because it's because at the end of the day, even if one of your relationships in your life were to be strained, that happens. People go through things all the time. And when two people are going through things in their life, you tend to butt heads, right? And things might get a little strained and a little heated, but it's not because that person was actively seeking you out, right? It's you're going through something, they're going through something, and, maybe you guys were just both in a bad mood. That doesn't mean that the friendship is ruined. The only reason why it would become ruined would be because you're actively pushing it and you're actively starting to go, well, then you're not my friend. Or, if it's with a significant other, then you go, well, then you never loved me to begin with, which isn't the case. It's just, even in relationships, you and your significant other are going to go through stuff. Just because you're together doesn't mean that you're one and the same. You're still two individual people. Your partner's going to have mental problems and you're going to have mental problems. They're going to go through stuff. You're going to go through stuff. Sometimes they may not be as emotionally available for a little bit. Sometimes you might not be emotionally available for a little bit. That doesn't mean that you don't love each other. It just means that when you go through things, you just need some time to yourself. And that's okay. So never feel bad about it. It's just, if people take you needing time to cope with your RSD offensively at all, then that kind of really shows that maybe they weren't your friends to begin with. And if it's with somebody that you're dating, that they weren't really interested in you to begin with. So it also kind of really helps weed out the people in your life that will have your back and you don't. Just like the friend that I mentioned earlier in my in the episode that sent the supportive text. It acknowledges that she's going through her own stuff. It acknowledges that she's not sure how to go about helping me, but acknowledges that she hopes that I feel better and that I'll be back to normal soon. So I think that's pretty much a good way to handle it. And I also know not to seek assurance. So that really helped a lot. And with that, I am going to end this week's episode. So as always, if you guys enjoyed, drop a like, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, because the notification bell will let you know when I upload new videos of the podcast. And with that, I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of your week, a wonderful weekend, and I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.